Crec que tenim uns bons 40 minuts per intentar recuperar algunes de les afirmacions, propostes, lectures que s'han donat a la taula. Jo diria que realment hi ha un estrany argument aquí, que és l'argument de la fotografia com un instrument que ha estat còmplice dels règims colonials, dels règims imperials, un argument que ve de les propostes d'Ariela, sens dubte, i més quan recentment ha declarat que la fotografia apareix o s'inventa no al segle XIX, sinó al 1492, la data del descobriment d'Amèrica o del dit descobriment d'Amèrica. És a dir, com si la fotografia deixés de ser un simple aparell tècnic i passa a ser un aparell, un dispositiu molt més gran i difús que està fonamentat en la captura i la posada en circulació global, en l'extracció constant. Jo crec que aquest argument ha quedat en certa manera latent en totes les intervencions, fins i tot en la proposta d'un museu que sigui capaç d'acceptar les absències d'un passat que no es pot completar amb objectes com els objectes que d'alguna manera encadenen els museus occidentals, que és una mica el meu resum de la proposta de François Vergés. Però sobretot també en veure que aquesta fotografia que fins ara hem entès sobretot com una pràctica que produeix evidències de fets, fins i tot d'injustícies, s'ha convertit en còmplice dels abusos. Estava Kader explicant com el cas de l'UACA està documentat en càmeres de vídeo i no obstant s'explica una altra cosa, fins i tot amb aquestes imatges. Això no és la primera vegada que passa. El 1991, Rodney King, un afroamericà, se li atura el cotxe a l'autopista de Los Angeles, 4 policies el treuen, l'estiren a terra i li donen una pallissa. Vesperon, això va ser gravat amb una càmera de vídeo d'aleshores, d'un lampista que acabava de tenir una filla i s'havia comprat la càmera per gravar la filla, però mirant per la finestra descobreix aquest terrible abús racista i policial. Aquelles imatges van donar la volta al món i explicaven de manera molt evident l'abús, el racisme latent dels Estats Units. Quan aquelles imatges es van utilitzar en el judici, la defensa va dir l'acusació va dir les imatges parlen per si soles, però la defensa de la policia va dir al tanto, anem a analitzar les imatges, de què són evidència? I van concloure que eren evidència d'un procediment policial totalment correcte, descomposant les imatges. Per tant, l'evidència fotogràfica ha estat un element, jo crec, latent en aquesta taula, per no dir el que ens ha explicat Susan Miselas. És a dir, quan arriba a Kurdistan, busca evidències, però se n'adona que aquestes evidències fotogràfiques, tal com les practica el fotoperiodista habitualment, no funcionaran. I és quan ha de passar a confeccionar un arxiu visual de la història del poble kurd. El que està confeccionant és la història d'una societat civil, perquè el que Saddam Hussein massacra amb la campanya d'Anfal no és un cos o 1.000 cossos, massacra una societat civil que estava constituïda. La admetem, la considerem o no una nació o un estat o el que sigui. Massacra una societat civil. I el treball que implica una societat civil. La fotografia dona evidència d'un cos mort, d'un cadàver, però la fotografia per si sola no dona evidència d'una societat civil. És l'arxiu fotogràfic, la història. En la mesura que hi ha hagut fotografia, hi ha hagut societat civil. Per tant, penso que aquest ha estat un argument, diguéssim, latent i que treu la fotografia d'aquesta visió tancada de l'aparell, de la tècnica, del testimoni, de la marca, i que li devem a Ariela amb el primer llibre o amb el gran llibre que és The Civil Contract of, el contracte civil de la fotografia. Per tant, jo voldria obrir la taula, cadascú podrà recuperar coses que s'han dit, intentant retornar a la fotografia com aquest instrument còmplice d'aquests abusos propis dels règims colonials, propis dels règims imperials. I serà Ariel qui acabarà conduint la taula. Gràcies a totes quatre.
Thank you for staying with us so long, and we will open it for questions. I think that what we will do at this time of the evening is maybe we will collect some questions, and then each of us will respond directly to questions addressed to us or addressed in general, because I think that there are some very interesting, commonalities between what we spoke about tonight. So we would love to hear your questions, and we will collect some questions together, and we'll make maybe 1 round or 2 rounds of answers. Yes.
Bueno, buenas tardes. Quiero agradecer a todos por vuestra presencia ahí. Mi pregunta es más por la Fundación Tapies en sí, porque creo que estamos aquí frente a un problema estructural, que hay muchísima gente blanca y yo me estoy preguntando dónde está la gente racializada, porque cuando hacéis como publicidades por estos tipos de eventos y especialmente en Barcelona, que sea bastante en el mundo del arte, no somos presentes en ningún sitio, nadie invita a los colectivos, a los activistas racializados y tampoco a los artistas. Y ahí estamos justamente hablando de esto también, y creo que sería bastante interesante poder hablar de este tema. ¿Para quién hacemos esto al final si el público es único blanco?
Do we want to collect a few questions, or do you want to reply? Okay. Because I saw you with the mic, so I was wondering. Thank you for the important question. Yeah. More questions, or reflections, or observations, or things that you want to unpack, to clarify?
Hello. Good evening. Thank you so much. I think I would like just to make one very simple question coming from what Kader and Françoise have said. How do you see the contemporary museum in the strategy of healing? Because you spoke of healing. Because Kader spoke a lot about his project at La Colonie, so it seems that like when he felt the need to make a new space that is not the museum, that is not the art space. So what is lacking in the regular art space, and also in the museum imagined and desired by Françoise? Is that museum compatible with the actual forms of museum or not? And of course for you, Ariel, and for Susan, how do you see your works addressing so many important questions in such strong structures as the Contemporary Art Museum?
Okay, I would continue with the conversation I already had about distance with Kader, in the sense of how distance play a role within your proposals. This museum without objects, or how feelings, what they do is to don't allow this distance to. That is distance is a question that has been very present into the anthropology as a discipline, to think about how we are approaching our object of study. So photography has a distance, archive has a distance, and I think disciplines are constructed through distance. So I was thinking in all your projects and thinking in the role of distance in all of them, and how feelings are, making this distance impossible. And
more questions? Yes.
It's about the object and how the object can become the place for an amnesis. Because I don't know if you know this project. Well, it is not a project. It's a museum, a self-sustained museum in Lampedusa Island, where it's called Porto M. And they started collecting the sedimentation of objects that were coming to the beaches of Lampedusa. And they have been collecting 3 kinds of objects. One, those objects who came to the island because the boat has disappeared in the Mediterranean. The second object is the object of those who finally arrived to Lampedusa and were jailed for a while, and they left some of the objects there in Lampedusa. And the third object is the object that was subtracted by the officials in the island. So you have three forms of objects that from where we can develop a memory to come. I like the idea because it's related with this Derridian idea of the l'avenir de la mémoire. No? So I'm also Chilean, so I'm asking in relation to the object related with the idea of the memory museum, because we have that institution there, and we are still criticizing the process of institutionalizing the object that was used by the dictatorship, and how difficult it is to develop the narration of the memory, because even though the institution is trying to propose a history, a history that is trying to reportray a justice, we don't have the opportunity of developing a belonging to the object. Like, we are not invited to talk with the objects. So if you can talk a little bit about that as the object as the anamnesis place.
To respond to these various questions about the audience, who do we speak to, where is the audience that should be engaged in these conversations, some reflections about contemporary art museums and their possibility to imagine healing in connection to them, the question of distance, maybe also of proximity, the question of objects, memory of the future. One of you would like to start going with answers? Yeah?
I can,
Yeah,
I mean,
so sure, go ahead.
There were a couple of questions that I found interesting. So maybe I will give one answer that will connect all of them. I think the question of how do you see the Contemporary Art Museum as a place for healing, for me it's very difficult, because I've always seen I'm sorry. For me it's very difficult because I've always seen the museum as a violent place, actually. It's a very violent place. Maybe because as an artist there's a kind of violence in museum, you know. And more today. People don't go anymore to museum. I mean, the majority, they go to do selfies. And then when they do a selfie, the ceramic jar behind them falls. You know, it's a very, I think but I'm also very, not skeptical, but I've always been clear that the process of healing, it's a passage. What I call the repair, la réparation, es un pasaje, is a passage, in the sense that I don't think that sometimes you can heal, actually. I think the passage needs to open something to develop a consciousness. And that's why I'm very much against the denial. I think the denial is really like what creates the injuries. And in any way, in anything, not only in colonialism, the denial. If you don't speak about something, it creates injuries. So I'm very kind of hoping that, on the contrary, we should reinvent new areas to share arts, because again the museum for me is becoming a mall thing. The distance with the object of studies, like the anthropology topic, so it's a very interesting question, but I would leave to my colleague the question of photography, because I respect so much photography also. But I have to tell you that for someone who's I was always been extremely interested in object, from the holy object, African mask, or a shaman from Nepal mask. We always talk about Africa, but in Nepal or Vietnam, you have incredible wooden artifact. We have no idea. I'm sure even some people cannot make the difference. Anyway, I've always been fascinated by old Virgin Mary that you can find in the West, in the Middle East. I mean, I think object, I'm talking now about concrete object, not the object of studies, but it's the same, I have to say, in my practice. It's, I think it's really about a metaphysic that do not belong only to holy objects, those that have been kept in museum and then fetishized either by a market, like tribal art market, for instance, or artworks, but also everyday life object. I mean, I think this notion of object is something that this metaphysic of object exists everywhere. I really like this quote by Suleiman Bashir Diag, who says that in societies, in African societies where systems of writing did not exist, masks and sculptures were probably philosophies. And I think that all objects are philosophies. Some of them are stronger, very strong. You cannot even take them. You find something. Sometimes when I find a ring on the floor, I leave it. I don't touch that. So, yeah, there is this. And then, last but not least, I was listening you question and remark, which I found extremely important, the notion of object as an amnesic matter. And what you mentioned here, I was listening your story. I never heard about Lampedusa. It was Lampedusa? Lampedusa, and it actually, I mean, the story of people who leave their place and try to reach another one, obviously leaving their object, but sometimes leaving also their bodies, reminded me something I really want to share with you here, because I think it's important that this story is known. In Tunisia, in the coast of Tunisia, there is a man who collected the last 15 years bodies of Haraga, so North African refugees, but also Sub-Saharan, who tried to reach Europe, reach Sicily, and died in the sea, and the sea brought back the bodies. And this man has buried them all. Since the last 15 years, he has created what Fethi Ben Slama talks about in my quote. You remember when Fethi says, in the end of the day, the street of the name of the street are the name of dead people. And he added, this name refer to face, to stories, to people. So I think this, in the end of the day, I think we have a responsibility with object as well as we have with bodies. Of course, you cannot compare. It's not comparison, but it's very much, for me, something that has to do with a connection to the ethos, actually, to ethic. So I will find the name of this person and will give you later. I forgot his name, but I think what this man is doing is absolutely unbelievable. Thank you.
Thank you. So maybe I'll follow and I'll respond to some of the questions that were raised. I'm not sure that I know how to respond to them at this time of the evening, but let me try. So I would like to start with the question of the audience. I cannot speak for the Tapies. I am coming here every once in a while to work on this project, so I'm not really from Barcelona, and I know very little about the local context. But I know that the people with whom I work at Tapies are trying to reach out to different communities. This is my interest, this is their interest, and I don't want to give any justification to the fact that certainly not enough people of color are sharing with us the room today and in other occasions, but I just want to say that I'm here until Saturday morning, and I'll be delighted to have to meet with a group of people or individuals who would like to come for a guided tour to speak with me about the exhibition and to share some of what I'm trying to do in this exhibition that I think that is relevant to many of the work that I know that are trying to engage with how to unlearn and undo imperial violence. So I'll be here on Friday morning, and I'll be happy to engage in conversations about this material. it's not an answer, but it's something that I would like to say here. I'll be here tomorrow also, but tomorrow I have some things to do. But on Friday morning, I'll be happy to be here for any conversation about the material. And I would like from this to move to the question of healing and the question of objects. I don't think that institutions can provide or offer any healing. Institutions are part of imperial crimes, and institutions should be transformed and should be transformed with many people. And I don't think either that artist or individual can come up with healing programs. It's only a way to maybe to facilitate conditions for people to pursue their imagination or their needs, how healing should be pursued in public venues. So I don't think that healing can be related to institutions, but undoing the violence that institutions are reproducing, this would facilitate the possibility of people to engage publicly with more practices of healing. And I would like to say something about objects and the way that I'm trying to address objects in this exhibition and in my work in between political theory and working with objects and photographs and material. So in the last couple of years, the conversation about restitution became central, as Françoise, I think, argued that it became a kind of brand. Nobody is doing in institutions something about it, but it became very fashionable to speak about restitution. And when it comes to the discussion on restitution, for example, the Sarsavoir report, that its bottom line is very important to restitute 90,000 objects to Africa. Africa, what is Africa? But this is the way that it is spoken in the report. But when they speak about objects, they speak about objects that were canonized by these Western museums that are responsible for the violence of destroying communities and extracting these objects. They count that only 3,000 objects were left in Africa. This in itself is outrageous, to count that only 3,000 objects were left in Africa. Imagine a continent. So who nominate these people who claim that 3,000 objects were left in Africa to reproduce this violence of imperial institutions? And among these objects in Africa, North Africa, from where my family is coming, is not even counted. They say at the beginning, North Africa is irrelevant. Private collections is irrelevant. What we are looking at is objects from West Africa. West Africa is an invention. It doesn't exist. It exists only in the imagination of imperial actors that created these positions out of which reports are being written, out of which the idea of restitution is being shaped. And what I'm trying to do in my work about objects and in relation to the extraction of objects from different communities. I'm looking mainly at Africa, including North Africa and the Middle East. What I'm trying to think about is not about objects, because when objects were extracted, you know, people, their life was destroyed in so many ways. So rather than looking at these objects as something that is already sealed and can be restituted as is, I'm trying to think about objects as sites in which rights are inscribed. So if you heard my lecture at the beginning, all my opposition to documents-based culture is because the idea that rights are being written in papers, in documents, by those people who took the liberty to give rights to people from whom they took everything. They took so many resources and they destroyed their material worlds, and the material worlds is not the opposite of spiritual world or legal world or political world. In the material world, rights are being inscribed. So by destroying fabrics of life, they destroyed system of rights. And I think that part of the process of healing is to recover these different system of rights that are in opposition to this document-based culture of rights that are actually just continuing, or in the name of which rights are being being constantly destroyed, because wherever you see site of destructions, and we see so many, you know that system of rights are being destroyed. So not only system of rights that were everywhere prior to the colonial world, but every day when they destroyed the little of rights that people are able to inscribe in their environment, in their objects, are being redestroyed. So when I'm thinking about rights, I'm not thinking about only right to the object, which means that people in today Nigeria, but people from Benin have a right to claim their objects. They claim them from the very moment when they were looted. So the idea that the discourse of restitution is new is completely false. The claim for restitution were there from the moment they were stolen. So, but not only thinking about these objects as objects that should be restituted, but as objects in connection to which, when we are looking, in Lampedusa, when we are looking at other places, at Araga, that are being drawn in the sea, these people, even if they don't say it overtly, that they are coming to live nearby their objects, we have a responsibility to disown these objects, or to to put pressure on museums to disown these objects, some of them to be restituted to their place of provenance, but some of them to be owned by local communities in different diasporas of all sorts all over the world. And when I'm saying disowning, and here I would like to conclude about the possibilities or facilitating healing, when I'm saying disowning objects, I am not saying what will be the final use or the final destination of these objects. There are millions of objects in Western museums, and we have an obligation, a duty, and a right to claim that these objects should first of all be disowned by these museums. And once they are being disowned, even if they still stay in their deposit, the communities that feel implicated in these objects, communities that feel that they have right to these objects, and communities that are not in the same territory with these objects but have right to these objects, should decide and determine what will be done with these objects. So thinking about objects, I'm thinking about an entire ecology or an entire cosmology to imagine the trajectories of these objects in relation to people that have right to these objects, and not only they have right to these objects, their rights are inscribed in these objects. So when they are being called undocumented, this is another violence that is expected from us as looking at images and recognizing the undocumented. No, they are not undocumented. We have to heal our language. We have to unlearn our language and call these people that are claiming their rights to the objects that stand for the documents that are claimed missing.
I cannot answer for the foundation, but what I can answer about the question of the public is a very difficult thing to do. It's not that easy. It's a constant effort. It has to be done every day, absolutely. You have to go to the places, you have to talk to the people, you have to spend a long time. It's not going to be, so it's really a work. You have to be committed to that, and it's not going to happen right away. So that's one thing. The things for museum and healing, I don't think that the question is to be healed in the museum. It's, many things about the museum. We talk about the museum as if in the world you just have the British Museum, the Louvre, and the National Gallery, or the Prado. As if you don't have the Apartheid Museum in Joburg, the District 6 in Cape Town, the Buenos Aires Museum about torture and the violation of human rights. As in Chile, you don't have anything. As in Dakar, you don't have the Musée des Civilisations Noires, which is trying to do something. So we remain, when we speak about the museum, totally focused on Europe. We are speaking for European as European. I'm sorry, you got a lot of museums outside of Europe, and people are trying more or less successfully to do things, especially about this question of history. Mostly all this museum done in Africa, South America, Central America, in North America, or in Asia, are about what we could call history and culture, and the question of today. And so we should really get our head outside of Europe, I mean, and then to look at what they are doing and how they do it. That's one. And the other things about the object, we talk about the object as if we know what we're talking about, as if there is one thing called the object. But the object has a gender, you know. There are some objects only used by women, some other only used by men. There are, you know, some are connected with age, with class, with part of the world. They travel, they change hands, so they change life. They have a biography, they have a history themselves outside of me. I'm not like me and my object. This object, you know, it's no longer. So we have also to pay attention. We have to not to see the object only through the European lens. You know, it's there are very few. The object is always something to which we give some value. We never talk about the iron of a, you know, woman. We do not speak about the broom of the domestic worker. And you know, what will be the object, this object, where there will be. I mean, I was, you know, I went to this, the feminist, the show about feminism at CCCB this morning. It's very interesting because the part about mostly European artists is bourgeois women absolutely obsessed with domestic work that they should not be doing, right? So you see them, you know, they iron, and so after, of course, they have become the object of ironing, so they have to contest ironing, and they have to do the blah, 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 blah. Okay, and so nowhere, you know, since the 70s, you already have migrant women in Europe, right? You already, and anyway, you have a long history of racialized women doing the domestic work. This does not appear. So even the relation with the object is screened through class and race. So we cannot say the object like that. That's just what I wanted, you know, to say. And you have things which are not object. And I was thinking about what, when Kader was talking about October 17, 1961, and this 17-year-old young woman, Fatima Bedar, she was identified 10 days after being drawn by her father because of her long hair, because she has, you know, she had been in water for too long. I think this is a story. There is no object for that. And I do think that there are some of the stories that could be said directly, and that may be the healing moment, if we want, and not through object and not through a screen, just by sitting as we are sitting and talking. And I know that story, I tell you, you know another story, you tell me, and we exchange stories about effectively oppressed people, people who do not have any object. Of course, you have the Lampedusa story, and I knew about it, and it made me think about this in Chile of women going to the desert, and they shift through the sand to find the little piece of bone that will be the testimony of the bodies thrown by the Pinochet dictatorship. These are not objects per se, but they are absolutely memory, site of memory. So we have to work on all this level, rather than saying, okay, that we're going to find one solution. We have to force ourselves, perhaps even for one story, I mean, one event, rather, we have 50 stories. But to give back a presence of this young 70-year-old woman, what was it? Where was she born? Why did she, was she, you know, her parents certainly migrated. She certainly lived in a slum, in a bidonville. Nanterre was very known for that. Nanterre, where today you have the university being built. So today, how this memory has been erased by the university, where you learn about something and certainly never about that. So how you do, the kind of palimpsest history, right? And constantly being very careful about this palimpsest. This constant history of level. So that I will say. So to be open, and to be open also to the fact that something, in 3 months is going to take everything away that you have suggested, because something will be learned. And that's okay. That's okay. It's the unfinished narrative of emancipation and liberation. I think the healing will go, through through the speaking. I think we have to learn also to unlearn so that we can learn. We have to learn to see also, because we go through school, and if there is something that really teaches us not to hear, not to see, not to smell, it's school. We have to sit like that for hours and listening to someone, and we cannot move. Our body learned to be completely like that. And so I will say that one of the places will be the body becoming again, like that. Remember when we had the things in the forest, Kader? We walked to the forest for one of these workshops I was doing. And at one point I said, okay, we're going to remain silent, not 1 minute, not 5 minutes, but 30 minutes. Suddenly we started to hear the bird that we have not heard because we were blabbering away. And then the body changed. Everyone started to lean on each other like that. We were not sitting like that. It was very, and the tone of the discussion changed after that. It was very more smooth. And without, any kind of close your eyes, hold your hand, do some meditation things, it was just shut up for a while. So that's that, and I will say it's a process also. We have also perhaps against what Kader or Suzanne or Ariela was saying, or some of you, this idea that the narrative has to have a beginning and an end, and has to be included. I think for what we want to do, we have to accept that it can be, adding, constantly. As what you were saying, what you did with the Kurds, they bring something, and then it goes through Berlin, and then it goes to Paris, and no other things. So it's some kind of and it's okay. It's okay. It does not have to be finished. And so that what the question of the memory of the future. I don't know. I think the present is so fascinating that I think we have so much to do with the present that we have so much to fight against. What Kader was saying about all this neo-fascism emerging. We have to learn again to go underground. We have to learn again to lie. We have again to dissimulate. We have to learn, a lot of strategy. We should have workshop on strategy to lie and not to be recognized by all this, recognition. It's very important that. I think that's very important. That's workshop. That's the object also of today, learning to hide in plain sight. That's very important. That's a big strategy of the enslaved. I mean, underground, this story of this, what's her name? She stayed for 2 years in the in a place at Ronca. Harriet, no. This enslaved woman, Harriet Jacobs. No. And she has just a loophole like that, and she was saying what was happening, and she remained like that. So it's like imagining constantly the possibility of going, of escaping, of fleeing, and so all how the enslaved, the white people thought they were dumb, so they spoke in front of them, and they were listening and going back to say, okay, there is something in insurrection being heard, or this guy is going to sell some slave, and they were running. So learning to play dumb, like we don't listen, but we are listening. We are not looking, but we are saying. I think that's what we can learn also from all this story about photography, about looking, about the frame. What is the frame? What is framing and unframing the frame that we are being imposed?
So I think the only territory that's left for me is the word distance. And it's perfect for a photographer, obviously. I mean, you either move your body or you take a different lens, It's very essential. I mean, amongst us, those of us who speak the language of the camera, in a sense, it's your very, which camera, how does it function, how is it heard, not heard? But also, are you a 28 or are you a zoom lens? Things, I mean, I'm making fun a little because we are tired. But, in a sense, there's something very essential to me about that. And I wanted to go back, but I think it's too much probably, but this question of the authentic object, because for me the history of this, whatever it is that survived, is it in your hand is something. And we don't, not put away in a box somewhere in an archive. I mean, it's the thing that somebody's held. And one of the first memories I have in Kurdistan, in this transitional place, was a man who I met who pulled out of his wallet a photograph that was probably this big, tiny, of a woman named Margaret George, who was a Christian Assyrian, and because she was Assyrian, she could fight with the Peshmerga in the 60s, the Kurdish fighters. No Muslim women could. And he always carried her with him. He had no relationship to her. She just stood as a symbol. He didn't say of the liberation of the 70s of women. I mean, what he was imagining fully. But he carried it very close. So these questions of what we carry close to us, I think, or how close we feel we can go to others, and that goes back to your notion of distance. I mean, the museum is complex for me because actually the last installation where the work right now is of Kurdistan, amongst others, is in Sao Paulo in the IMS, and the IMS is a free museum right on Paulista Avenida. It's completely open to the public, and it's quite remarkable in the way the flow works right off the street throughout the day. But I was literally installing and writing the names of all the towns that you saw just above where the stories were hanging off that wall as the Turks were bombing in Syria on the border. So when you ask about what kind of healing, if you ask about what does a museum mean, I didn't feel the violence of the museum. I felt the violence of the act. But in questioning what does it mean to be in that museum. And so with all those stories that came from Barcelona, that crossed the sea, that someone held in their hand and had a moment of, I wouldn't say healing, but touching or connecting or something at the same time, what does it mean in relation to the horror that we see at a great distance if we're fortunate and privileged enough to be distant? So.
Thank you for staying with us. Thank you, all of you.